You're going to ask me how I am.
I am, aren't I?
So it's Mothering Sunday, and we've decided to look at the Mothering Sunday texts, of which there are two, one from John's Gospel and one from Luke's Gospel. And you were going to talk to us about your thoughts on the John passage.
So the John passage is John 19, 25 to 27. Jesus has been nailed to the cross, and he sees from the cross 4 women who are there, are listed as being there. His mother, his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas or Cleopas, and Mary Magdalene. And nothing appears to be by accident in John's Gospel.
No.
The 4 women appear to mirror the 4 men, the soldiers, who are distributing Jesus' clothing now he's been crucified. So the contrast is notable. And again, it's interesting that there are 4 women and 1 man listed as being at the foot of the cross. So most of the male disciples have scarpered. But what we have in this passage is Jesus noticing not only his mother, but the beloved disciple next to her. So he says, "Woman, behold your son. Son, behold your mother." And from that moment, the disciple took her to his own home. Now, I wonder if really this is a bit contrived to put it into Mothering Sunday, to be totally frank, because I really wonder if it's actually about the beloved disciple, not about Jesus' mother. I was reading Simon Ponsonby's book, Amazed by Jesus, a little while ago. And in that, he talks about when he was first a chaplain in Oxford, and he was reading a passage about the beloved disciple in the Gospel of John. And he writes how he was suddenly overcome by a kind of like resentment and a feeling of jealousy that this was the beloved disciple, as opposed to himself, who was clearly not beloved in the same way. And of course, he prayed into this, and over time felt the Lord saying to him, "It's not that I love John any more than you. It's rather that John is aware of my love for him in a way that you don't appear to be." And later still, then, when he was reading 1 John, found in there that 6 times the author refers to the followers of Jesus as agapatoi, in other words, the beloved. So actually, the beloved disciple is the follower of Jesus, aka us. So the person we ought to be looking for when we're reading a passage like John 19, 25, 27 is the beloved disciple, because that's about us. So what do we find with the beloved disciple? We find that he is relocated by Jesus on the cross as effectively Jesus' brother, because now he will have his mother is Jesus' mother. And what is asked of the follower of Jesus? That you take the mother of Jesus into your own home. So the question arising from this isn't so much really about the place of motherhood or the honouring of mothers, it seems to me, so much as about who is it who we need to be taking into our own home? Who is it we need to be giving protection to? Who is the widow? Who is the bereaved? Who is the vulnerable one in our culture?
The refugee.
Well, it's actually a text, arguably, for the challenge we face in terms of the influx of Ukrainians, rather than necessarily being a Mothering Sunday passage. So I'm not sure I'm really giving much help.
You're not going to give any help at all, are you?
By saying
No
that
help
actually this is a
whatsoever.
peculiar text to have for Mothering Sunday. So that's where I am with that one. What about you? Can you help any more?
No. I mean, I suppose I would share a similar concern because I mean, think of the context of a Mothering Sunday service. If you were doing, a fairly straightforward Mothering Sunday service, you would expect there to have youngsters there, and there'd be the handing out of daffodils or something or other. So there's something about honouring mothers and motherhood, and the story in the centre of that service is a story about the crucifixion. So it's a bit. So let's. I'm wondering if I can do anything more with the other passage. So
The alternate, yeah.
the alternate passage is Luke 3, 33 to 35. The interesting thing to me is that both of these readings, one is from Luke and one is from John. And when you look at how Mary is portrayed in Luke and John, she is portrayed more favourably, and Jesus' relationship to her is portrayed more favourably, notwithstanding the wedding at Cana incident, but she is more present, as it were, than you find in Matthew and Mark. And I just checked before we started the little passage in Matthew, Mark and Luke where Jesus' family comes to the house where he is healing and teaching, and people say, "Oh, your family are outside," and if you look at them, Luke's is a sort of modified account. It's ameliorated. It's less harsh than Matthew and Mark's. So I was just struck that the readings come from those two gospels, and why might that be? So the passage from Luke it's Simeon speaking, and it's right after he has, as it were, proclaimed what we know as the Nunc Dimittis.
Yeah.
And the Nunc Dimittis is about departing in peace and a light to the Gentiles. So peace and light. And this passage, when he turns to, interestingly described as Jesus's father and mother, so there's dispute about did he really mean father? Surely Joseph isn't actually Jesus's father, and so forth. And there's some conjecture that this was a remnant of an early version of Luke's gospel before the doctrine or understanding of virgin birth had sort of got bedded into the tradition. Anyway, leave that as it is. So he turns to them, he blesses them. Simeon blesses them, and then turns and speaks to Mary, and ends up saying to Mary, speaking to Mary about a sword piercing her own soul. So an image, having talked about peace and light, an image then of this same, by the same source, as it were, of pain and suffering. And I suppose what struck me is the word soul, because he's not talking about physical violence. He's not talking about a literal sword. He's talking about the anguish, pain of witnessing your own child suffering, and therefore, and this is where I'm trying to kind of get this to a point where we might be able to use it in the sermon on Mothering Sunday. Therefore, what I felt as I reflected on this was my one's experience of being a parent, and that you want to protect and take care of your children. You do not want to see them suffer. You do not want to see things happen to them which will impinge, will pierce your own spirit, your own sort of that deep sense of identity and identification you have with your child. And so there's something profound about what we carry for our children, and that sense of connectedness. But then to reflect that that relationship between Mary and her son is possibly, can we, maybe I'm stretching this too far, but is this a mirroring of the relationship between God the Father and us as his children. So the way in which I'm not talking about the suffering of God in this sense, but the sense in which our own pain, our own suffering, our own sinfulness even is a cause of distress to the divine. So I'm just what I'm trying to do is to say there is a deep bond here. And the deep bond is a bond we know, those of us who are parents, we know we feel with our children, even if they're a long way away. The deep bond is the same bond that God feels with us. And so when we go astray, or when we are ourselves hurt, or when we are distressed or bewildered, then that is known by God.
And as you speak, I'm thinking of Maximus the Confessor.
You would, wouldn't you?
I would when you speak, because Maximus the Confessor has this understanding of the soul, which is both the essence of ourselves, which is deeply open to others in terms of relationship, not least and perhaps profoundly so in relation to our children, but that which also has the transcendent dimension of soul, which is open to God. So the sword that pierces Mary's heart is a double agony. It's the agony of her own child's death, but it's also the agony of that openness to God, and seeing that openness being nailed to a cross by humanity. That in the midst of her yes to God, she is witness to humanity's no to God in that most savage of ways. A sword indeed.
Which still doesn't quite help us with a cheery Mothering Sunday sermon, does it?
It's not great to be followed by daffodils, is it?
Yeah.
Oh well.
Yeah.
You can't please all the people all the time.
But it's interesting that those are the texts that we're given.
Yeah.